I'm back. Welcome back to the only channel that talks about yellow submarines. I'm Timbo, and today we are talking about... Well, before we start talking about what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about I've moved. I am no longer where I was living before. I own a home, baby. And during this time, I really have... I've seen movies, but I haven't really like dug into these movies. I saw Insidious: The Red Door. I will be making a video about that, but that's going to be something completely different because I hated it. And I saw Barbie, not a horror movie. It was just fun. So really, I have not really been in the world of movies or been watching movies or doing horror things. But I did listen to a lot of music while I've been in the process of moving. And, you know, unlike Anthony Fantano, I have a pretty good music taste. From Tame Impala, to Mac DeMarco, to MF Doom, to Baby Keem. I've listened to it all.
Does my music taste make me cool?
With all this time to listen to music, I've listened to it all. And I've gotten to the point where I've started to listen to even like music that I was really enjoying in high school. So a lot of indie music and a lot of classic rock. But there was one band in particular that I was listening to the most.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
Close your eyes and out
Consisting of bandmates John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, the Beatles were one of my favorite bands. And at one time in my life, they were all I really listened to. And even in the town that I used to live in, they would have a huge event that was just dedicated to the Beatles. It was a giant music festival. There would be people selling Beatle merchandise. I even bought this cool yellow submarine lunchbox that I got from the event that I lost whenever I decided that we needed to move from my parents' house when I was getting older and my parents were moving to a new house. So I had to move somewhere else because I didn't want to live far away, and now I don't know where that yellow submarine went. And for all you Beatle haters out there, the Beatles are great. They have such a diverse catalog of songs, and I mean, from the beginning to the end of what they created was constantly evolving and changing, but also still sticking to the core concept of a band while adding in, you know, an orchestra or adding instruments from different countries. So shut up. And like all Beatle heads, everybody has their favorite Beatle, and mine is Paul McCartney. I thought he was cool because he had a left-handed guitar, and I'm left-handed, and he sounded like this. Rock and roll! But as I listened to music like Strawberry Fields Forever and A Day in the Life, I started to reminisce on a theory about our boys here, the Beatles, that revolved around my favorite Beatle, Paul McCartney. It turned what the Beatles were doing from random and goofy in their music to almost deliberate and haunting. That's right, I'm talking about a horror theory about music. The theory that I am, referring to is the Paul is dead theory. In this theory, Paul McCartney dies in a car crash during the height of their success and is replaced by a man named William Campbell Shears, otherwise known as Billy Shears. So in today's video, I want to talk about this theory, talk about the tragedy that happened, how they are able to reference it in their music going forward, and why everybody around this theory wants to deny it so much. Let's get into it. So it's November 9th, 1966. The Vietnam War is happening. Ronald Reagan is entering the political world, and Beatlemania is in full swing. The Beatles had just released their newest album, Revolver, which brought the band into a new light with the various instruments and sounds that they were starting to experiment with. They were also taking part in some new substances that helped their minds reach new grounds, like LSD. On this particular day, the Beatles were together for a recording session when an argument sprung up and got to the point where Paul had to leave out of frustration with his bandmates. As Paul was furiously driving away from the studio, he lost control of his vehicle and wound up in a devastating car crash that gave him a massive headache. because he was decapitated because of this incident. MI5, the security service of the UK, had to quickly get involved with the rest of the band to coordinate what next steps they would have to take as a band. With the Beatles being one of the biggest heartthrobs in the world at this time, a government's last worry would be, what if they died? Or what if one of them died? They could have, potentially a lot more deaths on their hands from teens that were, willing to hurt themselves or end it all due to the loss of somebody like that. I mean, hell, whenever I was a kid back in the day, we had Justin Bieber. We had people cutting for Bieber. What year was that? We're gonna research cut for Bieber. I mean, even back in the day, we had Justin Bieber, one of the heartthrobs of my lifetime, was caught smoking weed. He was smoking weed. But what ended up happening was somebody on 4chan created a trend called cut for Bieber, and it spread like wildfire. I mean, it's obviously not the same, but the idea of somebody that you look up to or, is doing something that's, in your mind wrong, and you want to express, your frustrations. So imagine if Justin Bieber had died and people knew about it. People wouldn't have been probably cutting for Bieber. So with little deliberation or time on their hands, Paul was going to have to be replaced with Paul. Let me explain. In the winter of 1966, the Beatles and the MI5 held a Paul lookalike contest where they would search the globe for someone who best resembled and sounded as close as they could to Paul McCartney. But this contest would never see a winner or be mentioned again. But they did find their winner and their new Paul. Meet William Campbell Shears, or as the ending to the song Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band likes to say, Billy Shears. Billy Shears was from Louisiana, and based on the contest, was the closest to looking and sounding like Paul McCartney. But even with that, he was still far from being Paul, and people would know that it's not him. So, with this in mind, the MI5 decided that they needed to transform him completely and give him the Parent Trap treatment by having him fully become Paul McCartney. So with some plastic surgery, guitar lessons, and hours of studying Paul's mannerisms and speech patterns, they finally had created their new Paul McCartney. Now, obviously, when you have these types of people doing stuff like this for, creating a new Paul, they're going to get as close as they can and do a pretty great job. However, there's always going to be slight things you can find that make it look different. And I want to point those out and show you what exactly they did to cover it up. So first, Paul's ear, before, the original Paul, his ear is very round and wide, almost like sticking out. Billy Shears' ears, from some of the photos that we've seen, where I've seen online of people sharing, Billy's ears tend to be more of a long and skinny type of ear. It almost looks like the bottom wraps, or it almost droops at the bottom. Very different from Paul's ears. This would be hidden once the band began to transition into their new look for Sgt. Pepper's, with the longer sideburns on their face. Obviously, it wouldn't hide all the time, but you could see the difference between the two ears. And this is another argument that I see online a lot, is people are like, oh, well, as you get older, your body changes. Yeah, that's fine, but it's been a year. You can't tell me that some drugs and drinking some brews with the boys and making music is going to cause your ear to droop in such a drastic way within a year. Another noticeable issue is the upper lip. Due to the surgery, there is a scar on Billy's upper lip. There are also some other photos online where Paul McCartney got into a car crash online. Easily based off of this theory, you could easily say, well, this is just a photo they wanted to throw out there to show that Paul was in a crash and this is what it is. But in actuality, it's Billy Shears' face. And again, they were able to cover this up because the whole band started sporting mustaches at the same time. These guys obviously did want to be in 2022 rocking the stashes with all the boys going to see Top Gun. So that was the perfect way to hide it. And the best way they could have done it is by having all the boys rock stashes. And lastly, there's one more thing. This is obviously not going to be a big difference, but in some photos, you can see where, again, it's Paul's face is not as long as Billy Shears' face is. That you can see like a difference in like their chin, their like, again, like their faces. This could be a side effect of drugs. I mean, this could be a side effect of taking drugs, is your face looking skinnier. You're probably eating less. So this one kind of, that's why I put this one at the bottom, but it definitely could be it still. So I never really, obviously with all of this happening, I never really got to discuss how the rest of the Beatles felt about this. So while this is happening, we have, you have Billy Shears in surgery. What's that movie, Miss Congeniality, where like they're like having her in like a hangar bay? Mrs., I think you need to be a better girl. I think you need to be Mrs. Congeniality. So it's kind of like Miss Congeniality. They have Billy Shears in the hangar bay, just getting ready, becoming Paul. What are the other Beatles doing? Obviously, they know their friend died. And I couldn't imagine one of my friends dying and being told, hey, your buddy was really popular with the ladies. We're going to have to find a new guy to be your friend and be him. I'd be pretty upset. So while this is happening, the remaining Beatles were obviously, torn by the loss of their friend, but they couldn't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody about this. So during this period, they weren't making any music. They stopped for a little while. So during this period, the boys went out and took some time away from the music. Ringo went and spent some time with his loved ones. John went and acted in a war movie. And George, he headed to India and learned the sitar. While fake Paul's name was just out getting put on a soundtrack of a movie because he was composing it with George Martin. So that was, and honestly, like it was really, it kind of makes it adds to like the weirdness of it all. Just the fact that he composed something. He's never singing on this album. It's just music. But eventually, the record company was, they're like, we need money. We need more music. You're not being as popular as the Rolling Stones. George Martin, where's the boys at? And George was all like,
bruh, chill. I don't know why you're in a big time rush.
And got the boys back in the studio. But the boys were still grieving. They had just lost a brother and did not know how to make it feel as though he was still there. Even being a fake version of him to prop up next to them to make music. And he actually did. He was jamming out with them pretty well too. And did not want to tour. They didn't want to tour anymore because of the loss of their friend. I know before they obviously had issues with touring. But this is added to the fact that, hey, we weren't touring anymore anyways. This just makes it a lot easier because Paul's not with us. But then they had an idea. What if we made an album dedicated to Paul and referenced his passing through the album? That sounds like a cheeky idea. Alright, what do you think, Ringo? Look what I made! Ringo, you're a genius. So with the plan set, they were back in the studio to create an album that would not only be an evolution of their creativity and past work, but also as a living tombstone for their brother. This album would be packed with references to Paul's passing, from the lyrics in the songs to the album cover. Now, I could go and list out every single one of these references that's in the song, every song, as well as every album. Even every album after this has references to Paul's death, but obviously that's going to be a longer video than what this one is, and that's a lot. That's a lot to do. I'm just telling you about what it is. So I want to tell you about some of the ones that I think are the creepiest whenever you're originally learning about this theory. And when I still remember listening to some of these theories and like going back and listening to the music and like just looking at the album as I listen and just being freaked out. So let's get into it. Quick little side edit video here as I'm recording. I made a dumb mistake. So the first reference I'm about to tell you about is not necessarily on Sgt. Pepper's album. When the Beatles were needing to get back into the studio to make some songs for the record company, they released 2 songs, Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. Neither of those songs are on Sgt. Pepper's. They are on the following album, Magical Mystery Tour. So when I bring up this song, I failed to remember to bring this up in the video, but I wanted to tell you now. So quick little edit. Back to you, Tim. In Strawberry Fields Forever, at the end of the song, you can hear the words, "I buried Paul," when the song is played backwards. As a teenage boy, this scared the absolute shit out of me, mostly because I learned about it whenever I was locked out of my house after school one day, and I was sitting by myself for an hour, and that's all I was doing. It was just learning about this theory. I had thought I truly dug up some evil that even Ricky Bobby wouldn't even want. The next reference, in the song She's Leaving Home, they say the lyrics,
Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day.
November 9th, 1966, the day that Paul McCartney died, apparently, was a Wednesday. And on the back of the album, George Harrison is seen directly pointing at this time with his hands. There's some other stuff that they talk about on this album, that their hands spell out love, and how Paul is facing backwards, which there's a lot on this album. There's a lot. I highly recommend just go check this shit out. Then the song Good Morning references the time 5 o'clock as well, while also the singer sees that everyone around him is full of life. Creepy. So the next reference, A Day in the Life, is a song about Paul's crash in the morning and how people were not sure if it was him because he mind out in a car. And then now these 2 references, the 2 main references I want to kind of talk about that are on the album cover are the ones that relate to Paul's death. But again, there's a lot on there. Check it out yourself. On the album cover, you can actually see the boys standing there in the front, but Paul McCartney has a hand over his head. This is supposed to be a reference to a preacher praying over the body that has passed away. And then this one haunts me. If you put a mirror up halfway on the album to the words "Lonely Hearts," it creates the words "He died" and has an arrow pointing up at Paul. I'm getting chills like thinking about this because it's creepy. If theories like this are interesting to you, I highly recommend going out and just listening to these albums, listen to Sgt. Pepper's Onwards, and just listen to the lyrics of these songs, and just dig some more about it. You know, I'd love for you to come back and just comment and tell me some things you found. Maybe you find something that I didn't find. So, and like I said, after this album, they would still continue to do this. They would continue to honor their friend, talk about it without having to fully commit and tell the truth of what happened. Because, like I said, they couldn't tell the truth. So, as the Paul is dead theory began to gain traction and growth, and all these college kids start listening to these albums, smoking drugs, doing the weed, eating the devil's lettuce. I can't think of any more references to smoking weed. They were finding these theories, and they were wondering, well, who's this guy? Who's this Paul? So they immediately were shutting it down. The band's management and Paul McCartney himself were quick to address these claims and put an end to the sensationalist narrative that their boy, Paul McCartney, was dead. Back in the day, the Beatles' publicist Derek Taylor was among the first to debunk this theory. He would say in interviews that there was nothing more than a clever hoax by fans that were just trying to find something that was there that wasn't. And then according to Taylor, the band actually thought it was funny. They thought that it was really creative of their fans to find subtle little hints within the album itself. And they, of course, would play onto it because the Beatles were pranksters. So I can definitely see where a debunked theory would be, well, these boys, they were just having fun. They were making the music that they got to make, and it got popular because not only was it good, but there was added layers to it. So they got to do what they wanted to do and be fun and have fun.
But they didn't fool us. No, they did not.
And then in September of 1969, Life magazine published an exclusive interview with Paul McCartney, aiming to dispel the Paul is dead conspiracy once and for all. In this interview, Paul McCartney stated, "I'm alive and well. I'm very much alive," with a touch of humor, of course. He explained that it was all fake, it was all made up, and he's been the Paul that's been going around since the beginning. It's me, it's DDP. So to add further clarity to this otherwise crazy, idea, they all came together to state that there was no idea that they wanted to, lie to their fans. They don't want you to think that we're not here to lie to you guys. We're here to create music, get our vision across to people, and just have fun. But despite these official statements and Paul McCartney's public appearances, some die-hard conspiracists still remained unconvinced. They continued to dissect these albums, song lyrics, interviews, and even clues beyond their music, just their lives. The Paul is dead theory eventually became one of the most enduring urban legends in music history, showcasing the lasting power of fan-driven speculation. To me, the Beatles' legacy is going to be more than this theory forever. I love the Beatles. I love what they've made. I'm forever grateful to have their music in my life. They have music that is very relatable, that is sad, happy. It's meant for any type of feeling. The Beatles made a song for it. But there's some part of me, regardless of that fact, that is the theorist in me, the horror fanatic me, my mind is still always going to be wired to these references, and forever I'm always going to think about that whenever I'm thinking about the Beatles or I'm listening to the Beatles. I'm going to say, that just sounds way too convincing, or this lyric seems way too different to what they're going for. With that being said, I want to know what your thoughts are on this theory. Does it sound crazy? Do I sound crazy? Probably. And tell me, what other theories in music are there? Maybe there's other theories. I know there's like obviously there's the Kurt Cobain theory, this type of stuff. I love talking about scary things and gooby goober. No, not a goofy goober. That's not scary. Just tell me what you think. I want to know. I want to know what your thoughts are on this theory, what your thoughts are on the Beatles, what's your favorite Beatles song. Just tell me something. Tell me something. Please. Also, like and subscribe. I'm obviously trying to make videos again. My room, while it's definitely not complete, I'm getting there. I'm trying. I got to get some new lights. I mean, look at this. Look at this. I'm literally using a ring light like as close as I can. I got this other light here. I'm just, I'm making work because I want to get stuff to you guys as much as possible. I love making videos. It's fun to me. As always, I'm Timbo. And I just talked about that. Peace.